Perfect. So let's get started from where we left, and here we were. So again, if I go to my okay, so with respect to data catalog, I think any which ways will look at those. We just spoke about the theory part. Any which ways
Mhm.
data catalog and stuff, I think will mostly start from tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. So again, the moment I go back to Drive. Uh, did we create a discovery board? I think we did, right?
We did some.
Some WB1. Okay, is this your one?
No, 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 no.
Okay, I think this is the one we created. So the moment I click on any option, in fact, it gives me a list of options, right? So
Mm-hmm.
either I can right click on it and it gives me a whole list of options, or even on the left hand side as well, it opens up those options along with a few other details. So for example, I can check who is the owner of that discovery board, right? And this is especially relevant if there are discovery boards shared with me, right? Because that's how I can figure out, okay, I have
Mm-hmm.
access to 50 different discovery boards, but maybe 10 of those are created by me, but five of others are created by a different user and shared with me, and so on and so forth. So it gives me a quick view of the owner of the discovery board when the discovery board was created, as well as when the discovery board was last modified. Okay, now I can go in here and I can open this discovery board. We'll talk about the other aspects in a bit. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right. So as I mentioned, in the discovery, uh, as I am getting an echo, uh, is it
We'll
because?
go on mute.
Okay, thank you. All right. So the moment I create a discovery board, so every discovery board would have at least one or more sheets. That's what we discussed. And every sheet would have at least one or more visualizations. So, and that is why Workday creates basically uh, a blank visualization for me, even though there's no data. Now, what are the different parts of a discovery board? The first one is if I have view access, I would be able to I would be able to view it, obviously. But then if I have the edit access, I can also go ahead and edit a discovery board. Now, an owner of the discovery board can directly edit a discovery board, right? And we'll see later once we make changes. Right now, if you see, the save option is disabled because basically I've not made any changes to my visualization. But the moment I make any changes, it will enable me the option to go ahead and save those changes, right? Okay, I can roll back any of my changes. So redo, undo option, just like we have on an Excel. Okay, and now there are three important parts of a discovery board. So, or a visualization. So this entire area is basically called a discovery board workspace. So the moment you click on any visualization, when you select any viz, right, it shows you three options. So if I go back and if I click somewhere here, if you see, none of those options are displayed. But the moment I click on viz, the first option that is displayed is the data source panel. As I mentioned yesterday, every discovery board is ultimately consuming data which is there in Workday, right? And where is data stored in Workday? This is ultimately stored in your data sources, right? Now, these data sources could be Workday delivered data sources, which is your index data sources, for example, workers for HCM reporting, indexed workers, so on and so forth. Or these could be your Prism data sources. So if I scroll down, these are all the data sources which are available for me. And if I keep scrolling down, somewhere, let's look at the option. Okay, I don't think there is any. If you see, These are all Prism data sources, right? So these data sources, they were created as part of the Prism setup, or these were published, or data in these data sources was blended, consumed as part of the Prism setup, right? So a data source panel would allow you to select any of the Workday delivered data sources or the Prism data sources. So the first part is the data source panel, right? And you can use this to basically view, select, or change the data source for a selected viz. So a sheet can have multiple visualizations, and each of those visualizations can have a different data source, right? So there's no restriction. But when you copy a visualization, and we'll talk about that in a bit, so if you create a new duplicate, the new duplicate that Workday creates would have the exact same data source as the current one. But then that is something, as I mentioned, you can change the data source on a visualization at any given point in time. Okay, so I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. The second tab that you see here, so this is my data source panel, and this is grayed out because these two are only relevant for a visualization. So the moment I click on a visualization again, it becomes enabled. Okay, the second one is the builders panel. Now this is not available right now because I have not selected any data source. So the moment I select a data source from the data source panel, Workday would enable the builder panel for me. So what is the builder panel? Basically all my configurations, all my setup with respect to the visualization happens with the builder panel. So for example, what fields from the data source do I want to pull in, right? What is the visualization type I want to create? Whether it is a donut chart, whether it is a table, whether it is a chart, whether it is a pivot table, so on and so forth. So that entire configuration happens on a builder panel, and we'll look at that. So the next one is the builder panel or the builders panel, right? And this is basically used to build the visualization. So build the viz by selecting the fields and configure and specifying the configuration options. And the third one, if you see, in fact, when I click outside visualization somewhere here, the only panel that gets highlighted is this one. So this is called a filter panel. And the reason, see, in discovery board, system would only enable something which is relevant for where you are clicking on. So the moment I click on a sheet, system enables this filter panel. And what is a filter panel? As you already understand, a filter is a filter. So the way we create filters on a custom report, similarly, obviously, when I'm building a visualization, that is also a report, and I can apply filters to it. But then there are two kinds of filters that you can apply, and we'll talk about that. So filter can be applied for a selected visualization or on the entire sheet as well. So some filter can, and when you apply a filter on the entire sheet, then system would use those filter for all the visualizations in that sheet. And again, something we'll look at. So filter panel, so filter the data in a selected viz or the entire sheet. So two kinds of filters that we can build with respect to a discovery board. Okay, now all right, so here I have my first visualization, my first sheet. Now what I can do is I can click on this arrow icon and I can create a new duplicate sheet, or I can rename this sheet, right? And I'm basically calling it, let's say, what should we name it? Uh, diversity matrix, right? So you can right click on this drop down, rename it, create a duplicate sheet, and the moment I do that, Workday copies my sheet with the name. So the same logic as a report. It, if there are any sheet level filters that have been defined, it copies those filters as well, right? And then Workday creates a blank visualization if there are no visualizations in the original sheet. So for now, let me come in here and delete this. You can delete all the sheets except for the first sheet. Does it allow me? Right? Even if you're deleting it, Workday is adding a new blank sheet for me. So in that sense, you can delete all the sheets except for one sheet, right? So, and the same is for the visualization as well. So diversity matrix. Okay, so now this is my visualization. So what I want to do is first select the data source, right? Here I can select a data source by clicking on any of those data sources or simply search for them. So I'm searching for our favorite data source, that is workers by HCM, workers for HCM reporting. So the first thing that I've selected is the data source, which is workers for HCM reporting, right? Now this data source I've selected for the visualization. So data sources are visualization specific, right? The moment I click anywhere outside the data source, if you see my data source, sorry, the moment I click anywhere outside the visualization, my data sources are disabled. So data sources are always visualization specific. Okay, so a discovery board, as I mentioned, may have one or more visualizations, right? Okay, the different visualizations in a discovery board sheet or DB sheet can be related or unrelated. As I mentioned, you can create multiple visualizations on a discovery board sheet, each with a different data source. So when I say unrelated, they may each have different data sources. All right. Okay. Now, with respect to visualization, the moment I select the data source, right, the second thing that I'll select is the filters. So many of these are indexed. In fact, all the data sources that can be selected on a discovery board are only indexed data sources or Prism data sources. And you already know that many of the indexed data sources, they come with pre-built filters, right? So when you select a discovery board, you also have to define the filters. Now, if you look at the options with respect to workers for HCM reporting, I have different options, right? I can select all workers, all employees, all active workers, workers by specific organization, or so on and so forth. So I'm selecting all workers, right? Again, I have the other filter options as well. So I can select specific worker types and so on and so forth. So this is my primary filter, which I can apply directly on the data source. And I'm clicking on apply, right? Now, the moment I have selected the data source, now if you see the builder panel is enabled, right? Any point in time, if I want, I can go back and select a different data source. So I can any point in time, right now, the data source that is enabled is this one. And that's why I see it here with respect to this visualization. But any point in time, I can select a different data source and select it. Questions?
Um,
Mhm.
I think so. I understood on the indexed data sourcing, and then so what is that we're going to do it in the visualization part? Is it like we're going to select the fields and then trying to put it, or uh, I mean,
Yes, we'll talk
okay.
about that. So ultimately,
Okay.
what is the data source size,
Data source
or what
has
is the business
it's a
object?
wave. It's a wave, and it has set of. It's a
Hmm.
combination of multiple primary objects. And okay, so basically, data source it's like a wave, okay, and business object it's like a table. Table will have all the columns.
Hmm.
So I think a wave is a combination of primary and a share related business object. Okay, so we try to
So
extract.
ultimately, makes sense.
Yeah.
Perfect. So ultimately, when you build a report, and forget about the report type, right? When you build an advanced report or a matrix report or a trending report or any other report type, what is that you're selecting on your report? How is your report built? With the help of, so obviously you have already selected your data source. Now, when you go
Right.
inside the report, what is that you're doing? You're building any report with the help of fields, right? That is what you do. So yes, so what you said is right. The next step is ultimately our visualizations are nothing but a report. That is all our visualizations are. So they're also created with the help of fields, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit. So if I go here into the builders panel, ultimately based on the data source that I have selected, if you see, it lists out. So there's something called curated fields, and I'll talk about that later. But based on the data source I have selected, if you see, these are all the fields that are available. Let it load. So these are all the fields which are available. So it groups Workday automatically groups these fields together. For example, if I click on basic
Okay.
bio, I have a number of fields. So let's go into the system and quickly check. Right? Age group, the blood type, the date of birth, date of death, deceased. So ultimately, when you set employee name and so on and so forth. So this is what I mentioned again. So with Builder Panel, what you're doing is, so once you have selected the data source, with Builder Panel, you're actually designing your visualization, and you do that with the help of the fields. Make sense now?
Oh yes, yes, yes.
But any which ways, don't worry, we'll talk about each of these topics, right? So we'll create a visualization and then it will make sense for you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now,
Mm.
uh, with respect to visualizations, you can create different types of visualizations. So, visualization types. When I go in here and if I open that, if you see, when I click on this icon here, it shows me that there are different kinds of visualizations that you can select. So, the default one that is selected right now is an advanced report. But then I have other visualization types as well. So what is this visualization type? So once you have selected your data source, the next step is to select the visualization type. So the visualization type that you select, it basically determines something called the drop zones in the builder panel, right? It and it basically determines how the data is visually displayed in the this. So based on the, so ultimately you can correlate a visualization type to a report type. So based on the report type that you have selected a custom advanced report or a matrix report or a transposed report or an inbox report. The report output shows a specific format, right? So visualization type is exactly the same thing, right? But then there is an important difference, and that is some visualization types, they are compatible with custom reports and can be directly exported into exported in order to create advanced reports or matrix reports. So there are two things. First, the type of the visualization that you select, it determines how the visualization would represent that data for you. But then it also determines when you export this visualization, and if you have the report writer access, then you can export this. So once you export it, system automatically creates a custom report for you. So based on the visualization type you select, system automatically determines whether that exported visualization will it create an advanced report for you, or will it create a matrix report for you, right? Okay, so what are these different visualization types? If you see, there are categorized into three separate buckets. So the first bucket is visualization, and then I have a matrix report, and then I have an advanced report. So these are the three buckets in which visualizations are categorized. So the first one is your visualization, right? Now these visualization types, it is the first one that I showed you here. So these two that you, which is scatter plot and heat map, they are basically optimized for discovery board and they cannot be exported. So these two visualization types that you see here, these two cannot be exported into a custom report, right? So these
Okay.
two visualization types are optimized for discovery boards and cannot be exported into a custom, right? So what are these two visualization types? One is scatter plot, and then we have heat map, right? The second visualization type is of advanced report. So this, when exported, it creates, my battery is low, creates an advanced report, and this is simply a table. If I go back and if I can check, so an advanced report, and this is simply a table. And then we have third visualization type, which is of type matrix report. And these basically create a matrix report. And under this, we basically have three. The first one is chart. Then we have donut chart, and then finally we have pivot table. All right. Okay. So let's start with an advanced report, right? And as I mentioned, an advanced report. So in an advanced report, you can select any field. So let's say employee name, and this is what I meant by a drop zone. So if you
Okay.
remember, it said the visualization type determines the drop zone. So a
Hmm.
table, it only allows attributes. So what is an attribute? I'll just talk about that in a bit. So I have added full name, and if you see, my report automatically refreshes. I am adding email address and gender and maybe I can directly search for these fields. I'm searching for position, and I'm adding job profile. So if you see, it becomes very easy. So this is ultimately I'm building a report, but then I'm doing that. as a simple drag and drop.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right? Let me add just one more and then we'll talk about the field types.
So why there are so many organizations? Is it the result? I mean, when you typed supervisory org, there are so
Those,
many
so there are a
those
number
things
of
again.
so there could be a lot of calculated fields. Let's quickly check. Supervisory organization. All right. So this is supervisory organization. This is supervisory organization benefits, supervisory organization
Okay, okay.
vision,
All these are fields again. Okay, okay.
right?
Yeah,
So these are all fields. And then you have calculated fields as well.
right, right.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does it
Let
not
me.
have a performance issue because of loading that huge data sets or
So
huge?
yes. In terms of advanced reports or a table,
Mhm.
Workday defines a limit of around 50,000 records,
Okay,
right? So, but
okay.
then, though Workday gives you that option, a visualization or discovery board is not really built for an advanced report. That doesn't solve the purpose if you're just pulling data, right?
Mm,
But then,
mm,
as an end
mm.
user, as a manager, so the end user of or the uh, manager, probably employees, probably HR partners, and any which ways they'll only be able to see the data based on the security access that they have, right? So if I'm HR
Yeah.
partner for, let's say, Hyderabad location, I can only see data for employees in Hyderabad. So that is any which ways restricted for me,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
yeah, I understand on this. So mostly, so we might try to look at the analytical part of it, not
Right.
on the data part of it, right?
Correct.
So
That doesn't
I
make
get
sense.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and let's say I have a client. My client is they implemented Workday and they are of size 400K employees, right?
Mhm.
If we have to bring in the metrics for such a huge set of employees,
Mhm.
how like I mean from the performance wise or how is this will serve the purpose for such a larger clients
Okay.
like.
See, makes sense. And that is why the first thing that Workday has done is the discovery boards, they
Mhm.
are only enabled for index data sources.
Right.
So you don't even have any standard data sources to begin with. So, okay, so we were talking about the performance issue, right? Now, if you see, ultimately, whether you talk about now you have 400,000 employees in your system, right? But when you build reports for these employees, forget about discovery boards, forget about visualizations. Uh, have you built any custom reports, or is your client using any custom reports?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how are those custom reports working? See, see
Hmm.
yeah, first go ahead.
See, basically, whenever you're dealing with such a huge population, so you
Mhm.
always definitely ensure you're
Filter,
using filters or you're
right?
using, I mean, maybe the filtering is also majorly done with, CRFs, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, it depends, and not just that, right? So we always try to use the indexed data sources
Right.
wherever
Mm-hmm.
applicable. Not necessarily every time we use that. Wherever
Mm-hmm.
applicable, we certainly use indexed data sources, and definitely the way how you apply your filtering. So whichever the topmost results which gets filtered out, so that is how we're gonna order it while filtering also. So yeah, I think some performance techniques we definitely follow while working on such a huge data.
So you have answered your query, right? So with see, uh, see, Workday has not with Discovery Board. Workday has not. changed any of the underlying architecture, right? So discovery
Okay.
board is just a new medium by which you can present your data, which is already there. So earlier
Okay.
you were doing that with custom reports. Now
Mm-hmm.
you're doing that with a discovery board, a visualization. So the only difference is an end user also can build a visualization because it is simply a drag and drop, right?
Okay.
And that is why
Yeah.
it is, you can simply go ahead and migrate it or export it to a custom report, a matrix report, an advanced report. So
Mm-hmm.
this, if the given custom report works for a given data load, then the visualization should also work, right? So in terms of performance, there would not be any impact, right?
Okay.
Plus,
Okay.
Workday has made sure that only index. So unlike custom reports wherein you have the luxury of using standard data sources, here you don't have that luxury. So Workday has already kept that in mind. Only index data sources are available for you, right? And plus, on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, you can build your filters. That is something we'll do,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Now, basically the fields that you use on your report, there are two kinds of fields. Uh, and the reason we are discussing this is because based on the kind of visualization, Workday would automatically enable these field types. It will automatically enable you the relevant drop zones. So these fields are basically attributes. So fields in a visualization are one of two types, right? The first one is attribute. Now, what is an attribute?
Attribute. Hmm.
Yeah,
Field
if I have
in a visualization, one or two types.
not visualization, what is an attribute of a business object? Let's say a worker.
Hmm. Okay. So
Okay,
work
no
with
problem. So when you talk about any business object, a business object is nothing but a collection of attributes. So when I talk about worker, what are the attributes of a worker? Worker's first
yeah.
name, his age, his
Okay. So
gender, right?
when you said attributes, I was having a different
Right,
mindset. Okay.
right. So again,
Mm,
see, everything that we talk about here is based on what you already know, and that is why
mm.
the first thing that I asked you the first day we connected was, do you
Right.
already know reporting, right?
Yeah.
Because it is
Correct.
completely based on your understanding of reporting, data
Yeah.
sources or business object. So the
Yeah.
first field types are attributes. Now what you see here, these are all attributes,
Correct.
right? So these are all attributes of a worker. Let me save this. So the first field type that you can add is the fields of type attributes, and these are basically used for groupings, right? When we create our matrix, for example, when you create a matrix report, what do? You create a matrix report by column
Yeah.
grouping and row grouping,
Row grouping. Yeah.
right? So what are those? Those are attributes,
Okay.
right? So, and if I have to describe an attribute, it basically describes the property of a given business object, of a given entity, or if I put it this way, property of a given business object, right? The second thing, attributes can use any field types. So these are used for groupings. They can use any field types. And when I say any field type, an attribute can be of type instance, an attribute can be of type text. For
Text.
example, full name, it is a text. It can be of type date, right? It could be of type true or false, boolean. So an
Mm.
attribute can have any field type. It could be of type numeric, it could be of type currency, and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
right? Okay, now your advanced reports, they only allow attributes. And that is what you see. Because we have selected the visualization type as an advanced report, the only thing that you can add is an attribute, right? Okay, the second field types are your summarizations. So what I'll do is, let me go back to my, let's remove this. The tenant is a bit slow. Okay, now if I look at basic bio as an example, the moment I click on age group, this is slow here. Okay, I don't know why the tenant is slow. Okay, so for example, if I click on age group, this is a field of type attribute, right? However, let me click on age. So the moment I bring my cursor on age, if you see, this double chevron gets highlighted. And if I click on this, a number of summarizations. So when you create a matrix report, you, what are the different sections you have? You have the row grouping, you have the
Right.
column grouping, and then you have summarization types, right? So these
Yeah.
summarization types, they are automatically enabled by Workday only for fields of type or attributes of type numeric
Number.
or currency,
Number. Okay.
right? So the moment
Okay.
I bring my cursor on any field of type numeric or currency, Workday
Mm.
would show me the summarizations that are available for it.
Okay.
Right? So summarizations, these are basically used for your analysis.
So, this I understand for the delivered fields. Okay.
Mhm.
So, what
Even
if we
for
are
your
get
calculated fields, the same logic. See, even when you're creating your calculated fields are always of certain type, right? You create calculated fields of type date
no,
or
no,
type
no.
text.
Yeah, yeah. So the calc fields also I understood. So the
Mhm.
point is, let's say there was a at one point of time you mentioned we will also be getting a data from external, right?
Mhm.
So
Right,
whenever we are getting the data from external, so
right,
how will be the field field types are set?
right.
So is it like we're going to create a data set for those, and while creating a data set, we will map these individual each fields to the individual field type, or I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just
So based on the data in your data set, or based on your data in your source, Workday automatically identifies the relevant field type.
ah,
But then you
ah
also have the option to do mapping as well. So any which ways,
oh,
that's something we'll talk about.
okay, perfect. Yeah, sure.
So yes, uh, what you have said is right.
Okay.
So, but then ultimately, because if you see, even if you're using Prism data sources, Workday
Hmm.
has to ensure that they are all compatible, right?
Yeah,
So there as
yeah.
well, to be using the same field types,
Okay,
right?
okay, sure.
Okay, so now some of these reports are only compatible, obviously, or some of these, at least your summarizations, they are
Mm-hmm.
only compatible with some of the other visualization types. So now I'm clicking here
So,
and I want,
the
mhm,
the other question I had was like,
sure.
see, whenever we are working on a visualization, so
Mhm.
is it always suggested to go with the matrix type, because and
No,
not necessary, right? Okay.
right. And go ahead, ask your full
Uh,
question.
yeah. So I think when I said visualization or a dashboard or whatever, so I feel like it's more of a different charts, and
Right.
when you also get a flexibility to drill down and all those things. So do we also have that flexibility here with the drill
No,
down? Hmm.
not in terms of drill down. No, that option is
Okay,
not available.
okay, okay,
See,
sure.
ultimately, Workday has created this so that an end user would be able to do that. At
Mm-hmm.
this point in time, this is just the first or second iteration of discovery boards. So probably Workday
Okay.
would add it in subsequent releases.
And it.
Not
Okay.
available at this point in time,
Okay. Okay. Sure. Makes
right?
sense. Yeah.
Okay. So these are applicable for numeric and currency fields. So now I'm back. We are almost, we have just 2 minutes, but no problem. I want to create a new duplicate. As I mentioned, when you create a duplicate summarization, what Workday does is it copies the existing summarization,
Mm. Okay.
right? And then I can go ahead and make changes. So it copies the data source, it copies the visualization type, it copies the name as well. So
Okay.
I can click here and let me change the name, employee log. Let me, now I am clicking on my second summarization type.
So this is a table, right? How do I convert this into a chart?
Yes. So by simply, and that's what I'm going to do.
Okay. Okay.
Uh, sure. So all you need to do is, again, the moment you convert it into a chart, obviously in a chart you cannot show all of these data, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
Workday would automatically make the zero. So I'm going here and I'm selecting, let's say, a chart. The moment I do that, Workday would try to adjust all of these, and this is what I'm getting, right? It doesn't make sense, right? Obviously. So Workday is basically adding the full name, email, gender. It doesn't make sense. So what I'll do is I would go in here. This tenant is, and let me, so it updates the visualization in real time. And now let me remove this as well. I am searching for, let's say, the age group. Bring it here, right? So now Workday has automatically rendered my chart, right? Okay, now if something is not relevant, for example, let me select, uh, what should I select? Let me select gender and I'll try bringing it back here. If you see, if something is not relevant for a specific drop zone, Workday automatically grays it out,
Okay.
right? So in a matrix report, you cannot have two separate attributes added. So the moment I do that, it is grayed out. But then what I can have is, I can have these subordinate or sub-level groupings. The way we can add our subgroupings in a matrix report as well. The same logic applies here as well.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. If you have not added any summarization, Workday shows the default summarization of count. So I just added the age group and Workday is showing me the default summarization of count here, right? But if I want, I can add a specific summarization as well. So that is something we'll talk about tomorrow.